I can help you get better if you're smart enough. Hey there guys, it's me Malorian, and it's time for another Malorian Weekly. We're on to episode 3 now, and what we're going to be talking about today is how to get better. Now, can be applying to so many different things. Maybe you're trying to become a stronger player. Maybe you're trying to become a better painter. Maybe you're trying to develop your meta. This doesn't have to even apply to War Machine. You can really apply this to whatever you want. We're going to be talking about real ways to be making progress so that here in 2020 you can find that improvement. I know we're already like a ways into January, and normally all of your goals and your resolutions have already been made, but it's never too late, right? You should never be in a spot where like, it's too late, or just be so lazy in the way that you're making your resolutions and the things that you want to do that they just, again, never really occur. So what I really want to do then in this episode is really be teaching you how to find that success in the things you want to be successful in. It's kind of really a real win-win. Well, I don't know if it's a win-win. I'm not getting the win out of this, but it's a win for you, and let's say it's a double win for you. So let's just jump into it. Let's give some examples of some of the things you might be trying to be successful in. And again, we said things like painting and blah, 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 but let's try and deal first with the gaming one, because I think with the examples, the gaming one is the easiest one. That's probably more relatable to more people. Plus, it's easier for me to give examples of. So a lot of people during the start of the year or whenever, they're like, man, I just want to be better at this game. I just want to do better. And that's good. It's good that you have that inspiration and that drive to try and self-improve, but you need something more behind it. You need something to kind of give it somewhere to go. And the way that you're going to be doing these things is not just have a goal. You want to be having a SMART goal. Now, for some of my more mature viewers out there, this might be something you've already heard from work, the whole SMART acronym, and that's definitely the thing I'm going to be covering here today. And if you've not heard this, it's very important for you to be actually making these SMART goals and then SMART actions so that at the end of the year, at the end of whatever period you're going for, you're actually having results and you have something to show for it. So let's start from the beginning. When you're making a goal, what does the S stand for? Well, it's specific. Now, what that means for being a specific goal means being better is not really a specific goal. It's nothing that's really tangible. It's just, okay, you're better in what way? It has to be something very specific, like, okay, I want to be good enough that I'm going to be beating so-and-so who's the top person in our meta. Or I want to be good enough by the end of this year that when it gets to this tournament, I end up in the top 8 or something like that. A very specific goal that's not gray in any way. It's a real target that I can say that is what I'm specifically trying to do. That is my goal. And again, it sounds like that's a dumb thing. Like, of course, it has to be specific, but you got to really think that so many goals that people make are not specific. They're gray. They're, if I bring it back to weight loss, it's like, I want to lose weight. Well, okay, that's great, but specifically how? Specifically how much? All those types of things you have to be very, very specific on. Okay, so that's the S. What's the M in our next part of the acronym? Well, that's going to be measurable. Again, it's really good that we have something that we want to do, but if we have no way to measure that success at the end of the year, or whatever it comes down to, how are we actually going to determine whether this was a success or not? And again, I think a good example is that way that we actually want to maybe improve as a player. Because again, if we're saying in that one example that, okay, by the end of the year, I want to be in the top 8, well, that's a very easy measurement to make. Were you in the top 8? That's a yes or no thing. That's measurable. That's something that we can look at the specifics for the first part. And then now, is it something that I can now determine to be true. And I think it's something you can be thinking of as well, is that you can always break this up a little bit more. You can be saying, okay, my real goal for this is I want to try being in the top 8, but if nothing else, my secondary goal is I want to be going at least 2-2 in this big tournament, right? Something like that. I mean, you can always break those down to, your gold standard and your silver standard. You can always break these things down, but again, there has to be something where at the very end of the year you can measure to and see whether you are a success or not, because otherwise there's nothing really to truly drive towards. So the next thing that we are needing to say in this acronym is the A part, which is assignable. And what this really means is that, well, who's doing what? You have a specific goal that might be measurable, but who's actually doing it? And in some cases, it's really obvious, right? Like in the whole thing where I want to be in the top 8 in this tournament at the end, well, it's assigned to me. I'm that person. And so in those cases, assignable is very clear cut. However, if you're trying to get something more like maybe when I run this tournament at the end of the year, I want to be getting up to 60 people. Well, that assignable might be a little bit more different where, okay, my tournament wants to get over 60 people, but how am I breaking this up? In part of my goal, I'm going to have to make sure I contact these people. I'm going to have to make sure I contact these people. And we're going to get that later on. We're going to be talking about how we're going to be breaking up these things to make them more manageable. But the assignable part and putting a name that is going to be assigned to that action, it's going to be accountable to that action is super important. Otherwise, it's just kind of like an action sitting there in space, hoping that somebody actually does it. All right, so we got the S, we get the M, we get the A. That means we're on to R. And the R one I always find is semi-insulting, but it's realistic. And even though this is kind of insulting, because if someone's to come to you and be like, I got this goal, and if their response was, well, that's not realistic, or even asking the question, is that realistic? It's like, oh, ouch. It's a very important thing to think about, because if we're at the start of the year here and we're trying to make these goals for ourselves, we have to really ask ourselves the question, is this a realistic goal? Because if we start going after unrealistic goals, well, we're just going to burn ourselves out. And by the time that we get to the end of the year, guess what? We didn't actually meet our goals. And now our train is derailed. When it gets to 2021, it's not about looking to the next step. We're just like, it's a failure. I'm always going to be a failure. I'm maybe not that dramatic, but you get what I'm getting at, where you need something that you can realistically achieve. Otherwise, how are you going to find success? Again, another good example might be here would be in that playing. Maybe the whole idea is, in this first year, I'm going to be on the WTC team. And then you have to ask yourself, am I going to be really in the top X players in my country at the end of this year? Am I already seeing good results? Maybe I want to scale that thing back, instead of being like, I'm going to be on the WTC, to being like, I'm going to go and place in the top table in one tournament this year. Something like that. And it is a little bit of early humble pie, but if you can eat that humble pie early, you can set up better goals, which you can then make more realistic and actually achieve them, get that success, and move on and actually become better in that way. So the very last one is time related. So if you have a time-related goal, you actually have an endpoint. If we're talking about something like, okay, I want to be the top 4 in this tournament or top 8 or something. All right, well, are we talking about this year? Which tournament? Is there a specific tournament? So it's that date. Is there a goal that's at the end of the year? And again, I kind of really set up this premise where we were making these year-long goals, but that time could, of course, be anything. Maybe you're making goals that are month-based. Maybe you're making goals that are 5 years out. Whatever it is, whenever you're making these goals, there has to be a time associated, because again, if you're trying to find some way where at the end you're trying to measure and find out if you're successful, there has to be a time when you're stopping and finding out if you're successful by that time. So to quickly review those steps again, your goal has to be SMART. It has to be specific. It has to be measurable. It has to be assignable. It has to be realistic. And it also has to be time-based. Now, that's great. Let's assume that you got that in there. We have SMART goals, and that's fantastic. Well, we're not done now, because I could say that my goal for the end of this year, which could be a smart goal, is something like I want to be increasing the amount of tournaments in my area. I specifically am going to be running 6 tournaments this year. I'm going to make sure to run 1 tournament every 2 months and blah, 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 blah. You know, I can do those things, but if I just put that as one big goal and don't start breaking these things up, I can get very long down the way and find out like, okay, this is all falling apart. And I guess I kind of like already went too far by saying I was going to do 1 tournament every 2 months, but that's the type of thing that you need to do to break that larger goal. Because I mean, again, if I just said I want to run 6 tournaments by the end of the year, that meets that SMART criteria, but I can find myself now in the last couple of months of the year being like, now at this point it's unrealistic. Because I didn't break up this, I'm in a lot of trouble. I think another good example of this, and right now my local place here, we're doing a painting competition. It's very easy, where people at the start of the competition will be like, okay, what is the goal of this? I have to paint 50 points. All right, I want to paint this and this and this and this and this. Time goes on, all of a sudden you're at the end, it's crunch time, and now you're in a rush of trying to get these things done. You don't make it, you trip at the end, and now you weren't successful. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of you started thinking like, wow, that's a lot like school and work and stuff like that too. And I mean, that's why these type of rules and lessons can apply to other things too. So you really have to break these things up. So going with that example of the painting, I tell people, don't just make yourself having the goal of 50 points over the month. Figure out what your 50 points are. What are the models you need to paint, and then set some milestones. Basically, you got 4 weeks to the month. So what are you going to be painting in week 1? Have it assigned, make that a mini milestone, make it happen. And at the same time, don't just plan for that first month, plan them all. Plan that by this month, the second month, I'm going to paint this. Sorry, the second week. The third week, I'm going to paint this. And the fourth week, I'm going to do that. By doing these things, I've not only made a SMART goal, but I also have SMART milestones, or you can call them SMART actions, all the way through going to the end. And again, I mean, the things like the painting thing can be very easy, but you can be applying this to like this, a major tournament. Let's say you are deciding you're going to be running a con. Now, you can't really break out too many things. You can't say like, I'm going to plan 10% of the con in this month and 10% here. That's not really something that's measurable and very specific. What you'd want to do in that case and be like, okay, I am going to go and book the venue by this date. I am going to go and book the food by this date. I'm going to be booking all and buying all the prizes at this time. This is where I'm going to be doing all the communication and blah, 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 blah. You have to break those things up. Another great example I thought of is like when people want to go and write a book. They'll say like, you know what I'm going to do this year? I'm going to write a book. And that's it. And then they get to the end of the year, and guess what? You didn't write that book. But if you broke those things up and just said, you know what? By the end of the first month, I'm going to plan things out. I'm going to have a general plot line, and I am going to write the first sentence. And a lot of times that's like a big icebreaker. That's actually a pretty big deal. And then I'll break those things up and say like, by the end of February, I'll be done the first chapter. By the end of March, the second chapter, so on and so on. And it's by having those very smart, broken up milestones that you're actually going to be finding success. So there you go. There's really the whole thing. And I really do hope you take this to heart. Whether you're one of my local people trying to break up and trying to find a way to make this whole painting challenge work for you, whether you're trying to become a better player or whatever you're trying to do, really try and apply that SMART acronym, making it specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, and time-based. It's going to help you so much to try and find a way to get that real success. And at the end of the year, you're just going to be better at whatever you're trying to do because you set yourself up for that success. So there you go. Thanks for watching. Hopefully, I mean, I'd love to, like, maybe at the end of the year, people are going to come back and say what they were successful in. But if nothing else, if you have any other hints or anything like that, some tips to be sharing on others, feel free to post it down below. And otherwise, we'll catch you later. Bye.